Hey everybody, it's John Arnold here, and I'm welcoming you all back to another installment of my ongoing podcast series with my longtime partner here, Chris Fine. Hey Chris, good to have you back on for another round.
Hi, John. Nice to be here again. Thanks.
All right, so we are trying to stay on top of many trends, and in our last podcast, we talked a bit about Enterprise Connect in Orlando, Florida, and we'll come back to a few more takeaways from that one. I think from what I have heard, people have really enjoyed our talk about that, and kind of building off of that and other things from what you've been seeing too, Chris, is something we're both getting a sense of, and that's this IT role and how it's changing with changing technologies, changing priorities within organizations, the changing relationship I think that they're seeing with end users who are more tech savvy, sometimes even smarter with tech than the IT folks are, which is kind of a scary proposition. But clearly the IT role, I think is under a lot of pressure, right? Just everyday stuff. We know there's that do more with less thing that's been going on for a while and probably isn't going to change. But I think the broader thing that we're both seeing is this challenge they're faced with to stay relevant, to stay strategic within their organizations, because they're followers as much as they have been leaders. And that makes it a difficult spot for them to kind of settle into a role within the organization to create value, keep the lights on, keep people happy, etc. Right, Chris?
Yeah, John, that's great. Yeah, that's a really good point. If you think about the terrain of the technology and the franchise around IT, it's undergoing some of the same types of changes more broadly as businesses change the way they approach work and change the way that people interact and collaborate in work processes and automation and many other things. And if you think about the infrastructure, more and more of it's going to the cloud. And also there are more and more standardized types of products, a la Salesforce, Workday, and many others that have taken over major business processes that used to be done with a lot of technology in-house. So ironically, in a more and more technical type of environment, the in-house technology has to reinvent itself, as do the people who are the custodians of that technology. And it is a challenge, but I think it's a big opportunity also.
For sure. So I know we're both seeing some of this, but I mean, you were just at an event where you saw some examples that are probably more to do with business continuity and maybe emergency response. But clearly, there were a lot of these scenarios that are out of the norm that I think really test what IT can do, and maybe even philosophically what their role needs to be in the organization. What is the business that they really are in? And it sounds like you came away with some pretty interesting views on that from what you saw there.
Yeah, John, I just came back from a conference called Continuity Insights, and that's focused around business continuity, resilience, response to various types of events that can impact the function of a business. And to what you're saying, I've seen in that field, based on the conference and a lot of dialogue, as well as my usual field of next generation workplace, that those are the twin sides of my business, next generation workplace and various types of security, cyber, physical, etc., related to technology. I'm seeing absolutely the changing role of IT. And for example, in the area of business continuity planning used to be a fairly administrative type of thing where people would work on plans, and then those plans were required by regulation, sometimes by business policy, compliance, etc. But they were fairly static and they were designed to be invoked if you had an extended type of major outage. So, for example, Hurricane Sandy, as we had in the New York area a few years ago, you would invoke those plans. You would open emergency locations. You would have plans for extended work at home, et cetera, et cetera. But what I'm finding in that area is that more and more of these groups, which used to be kind of back office type of things, are reaching out to the strategy and the business heads and are being reached out to by other stakeholders, security, information security, etc., the CIO's office, because the threats are growing on both the cyber and physical areas, and everybody needs to be involved, and it's actually fairly dynamic. And there's a new generation of tools, as I was saying about, for example, the cloud. There are a new generation of cloud-based tools that allow much more integration among all these different functions. And so the role of information security, cyber, and physical security and business continuity is really about adding value to the business, not just sort of having something in place for a long-term eventuality. And that's the same thing I see on the next generation workplace area too, where areas like real estate, facilities management, and IT are much more aligned with the personnel retention, hiring, security and safety, and a long-term function of the business rather than just supporting it.
Yeah, different hats, right? They probably never thought they'd be signing up for, but it becomes part of that IT scope. And it's similar what I've been seeing, kind of leading to Enterprise Connect. Some of the companies I've been working with from that show, I'm seeing examples where IT is struggling with not just how to embrace these new technologies, but actually how to deploy them and make them accessible within the environment, within the organization. So, AI in particular is a real, it's a real Pandora's box, because you don't want to intimidate people with technology they don't understand. You don't want to position this technology as possible job replacement. So there's a lot of things they have to struggle with that are very different from the world of just, rolling out a new PBX. Automation, they'll be drawn to anything that does that because it makes their workflows more efficient within IT. And of course, when you get into the world of collaboration, obviously when you automate things like setting up meetings, and we've talked about that before, that's all good technology application for sure that people will welcome. But at the same time, there are a lot of imperfections in these technologies too. So it's not as simple as it looks. When we talk about, landline telephony, that's been perfected for decades. Everyone knows how it's going to go. It always works well, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of these new applications, you think about chatbots, you think about speech recognition, they work okay, but they have a long way to go. So there has to be a little bit of tolerance, built into this, where the margin of error is just part of the learning curve. And that's a hard thing for people to get into when you're going 100 miles an hour in your workday, and then you all of a sudden have to slow down and repeat yourself over and over again so the chatbot can understand you. That's not going to go over well. So there's definitely a lot in play here, and the word you mentioned before, dynamic, is a big part of this. And that's also, a cultural change too, in terms of how we engage with technology. And it speaks to, another layer of this is the changing demographics. The IT culture is going to change as the people running it get younger and are more digitally savvy. That's going to be an interesting thing to watch as well. And I think they'll have a better native understanding of how fluid these technologies can be compared to the way they were, as you said, these static environments where things didn't change a whole lot.
I agree. And one of the things that's underlying this, which it's so common that I don't think it gets a lot of play all the time, or certainly in this context, is the Agile movement, DevSecOps, Agile development, etc., which is a revolution in terms of developing applications and systems, especially when you couple it with sort of Lego-like cloud infrastructures, where you can put a solution together really quickly. And for example, to your point about AI, you can choose from a giant menu of functionality that you can basically get off the shelf, either from open software or a built-in product on these cloud platforms, and tie it into what you're doing. So as a result, the bar of responsiveness has become much higher, where you just have to respond quickly. Because if you don't, your competitors are. And these tools allow you to do that. But to your point about considerations involved, you have to think a lot about, are you doing something that has some implication with respect to data privacy? Are you doing something that has serious implications on job content? Things like that. You can put all this stuff together, but you have to think about all that too. And balancing all of that is one of the challenges for IT and all the other stakeholders going forward. However, I do think there's an increasing realization that that's so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Boy, a lot of moving parts here for sure. Well, I think we should cap it at that, Chris, because we could be opening up a whole bunch of new paths here. So, and we will get to them in future podcasts. But I think that's a good jumping off point for this episode, because the IT role, as we started here, I think is one that everyone is thinking about. And as we go to these events and share some of our insights, I think it really helps bring that broader perspective that we have as industry-based analysts and consultants, right? So I think we hope our listeners out there are taking it in stride. We're certainly trying to be vendor neutral, right? And looking at the bigger picture here.
I agree, John. I just think that the more we talk about this stuff and the more that I see in various places, the more holistically that we all have to think about technology and its relation to business. And the more fluid we have to be about it, and dynamic, as you say. And that's where it's all going. If you look at what IT is a mirror of, supporting business, then you have to be as dynamic as business is becoming. And that's a huge opportunity for many of our vendors and for those to come. But it's also a challenge for businesses that have to adapt to it. But I think it's a theme we'll probably visit more and more as we talk.
Okay, sounds good. All right, with that, Chris, we're going to be over and out. So let's thank everyone here now for listening, and we really hope you're getting something good out of these podcasts, and we'll be back next edition with more of the same, and there's plenty to come, right, Chris?
Yes, and thanks, John. Thanks, everybody. It's always great to be with you.